From the Gigadenza archive, Article 23757. Flawed Fables. Perhaps the most regrettable aspect about Professor Jordan Peterson's latest feature-length deconstruction, exposing the moral minefield of similes, metaphors, personifications, and contemporary adult narratives, concealed within another classic fairy tale penned by the Brothers Grimm, is that our two fictionally fortified siblings remain too dead to return from the graves in which they are currently rotating faster than fair trade Catherine wheels, and challenge a contemporary clinical psychologist's interpretation of their timeless masterpiece, Hansel and Gretel. This is, purportedly, the story of two repressed teenagers, who are not, as the original text conveys, brother and sister, but rather an innocent allegorical representation of Adam and Eve, whose collective subconscious has been spiritually enthused with the notion of sinful incestuousness, in order to perpetuate the delusion that pleasures of the flesh, whether in wedlock or evolving from a moment of spontaneous desire, are twisted carnal perversions, worthy of only the gravest punishments that could possibly be conceived by an old-age pensioner living inside a cottage constructed entirely from sweet cakes, savoury bakes, and a variety of biscuit-based snacks, including organic honey and muesli muffins, grass-fed all-butter shortbread, wholemeal digestives, gluten-deficient milk chocolate chip cookies, and Mrs. Coggins's vegan-friendly coconut macaroons. The house supposedly symbolises God's proverbial forbidden fruit, aka the toxic toffee apple of one's wandering eye, which Hansel, following his capture, is forced to ingest against his will by the old lady, who is in truth an embodiment of both Lucifer and the Lord's eternally condemned serpent, which are themselves metaphysically conjoined metaphors. Hansel resists temptation long enough for Gretel to save him by char-grilling Granny inside her own oven, which amounts to sending Satan to hell. Meanwhile, the breadcrumbs and pebbles which Earth's celestial muse illuminates upon the forest floor respectively represent profligacy and prosperity, with the latter ultimately leading to the triumph of good over evil in the story, and conceptually symbolising practical selflessness for humanity's universal benefit. The latter interpretation was, in fact-checked fiction, one written by accomplished literary historian Dr. Arthur Landry, an ex-Ivy Leaguer who obtained his PhD at Connecticut's prestigious Yale University in 1975. This, however, is metaphorical child's play when compared to a far more scrupulous dissection of similar subject matter, carried out by Philip Pollux, an equally acclaimed scholar of classic fictional texts derived from ancient legends and regional folklore, who recently penned a lengthy essay for the Humboldt Inquirer whilst on vacation in the Tibetan mountains, which provided a refreshingly unorthodox insight into the Grimm twins' most controversial and divisive tale of harsh moral truths, Rumpelstiltskin. An extract reads as follows. The general consensus is that its core narrative was conceived to illustrate the perils of trusting evidently innocent figures, adept in speechcraft, the art of persuasion, and perhaps boasting a seemingly transcendental practical skill, who might approach you at a time in your life when a crisis has befallen you, leaving your emotions exposed and vulnerable to exploitation, such as being missold car financing, before offering you a definitive solution out of seemingly selfless moral obligation, with no terminally expensive strings attached. In this case, it is the miller's daughter, whose incompetent father, being ill-equipped to harvest enough sustainable corn to support his family, leads an avaricious king to believe that she possesses supernatural powers, again emphasizing the dangers of overly infatuated parents praising their children to the point of self-delusion, and promises she will spin straw into enough gold to pay their exorbitant council tax bill. The king imprisons the girl in his castle's dungeon, decreeing she will remain there until her father's pledge is made manifest, whereupon Rumpelstiltskin, a vertically challenged alchemist, appears and willingly bails the peasant girl out by accomplishing the task himself. Cutting to the chaff, the king, then convinced by the miller's daughter's profitable credentials, orders her to repeat the process in 2 further rooms filled with progressively larger loads of straw. Old Rumpole of Bales rematerializes and again agrees to render the king's monumental assignment on her behalf, only this time demands that she give up her firstborn child to him in return, which he claims he will raise lovingly and as his own. She agrees to his terms, and after the king discovers his excessive demands have been met, he asks the girl's hand in marriage, which she gladly offers, despite having been effectively condemned to death by the very same husband-to-be. The couple consummate their union and soon give birth to a sweet baby daughter, prompting the dwarf's covert reappearance to the girl to collect his mortal debt. The child he would never otherwise father. When the now queen breaks down in tears and appeals for one last chance to retain custody of her firstborn, Rumpole takes pity and declares that he will waive his stipulation if she can guess his name. Rather than play fair, the scheming queen instructs the king's most trusted courtier to venture into the forest, where the dwarf is suspected to be lodging, and report back with any pertinent information. By fortuitous coincidence, he spies Rumpelstiltskin dancing around a campfire, singing his name to the trees, and makes haste back to the castle to divulge it to the queen. When the dwarf again returns expecting to adopt his beloved foster child, the queen reveals his moniker, effectively cheating him out of the debt, which he's already once voluntarily renounced his right to claim, whereupon he flies into a turbulent rage and fatally tears himself in half. Most scholars of historic fiction will cast Rumpelstiltskin as the tale's villain, on account that he utilised his prodigious skills to deceitfully manipulate an innocent girl into agreeing to part with something that any humane mortal would appreciate no mother would ultimately be willing to surrender, though others insist this first contingent is misguided in their willingness to utterly overlook the far more nefarious actions of the ruthless king, who would have happily left the miller's daughter to perish had she not fulfilled his avaricious desires. The same group of historians also claim that somewhere in Canada there exists an unpublished sequel to the work, in which both the king and queen are strangled to death in their sleep by a magic hay bale enchanted by Rumpole's vengeful twin brother, who then carries the couple's daughter away from the castle to honour his siblings' unpaid debt, and raises her in an environment untarnished by corporate greed that had corrupted the miller's daughter to the extent that she was willing to accept a money-grabbing tyrant's hand in wedlock, and which Rumpelstiltskin had, in fact, innocently fallen victim to in his efforts to carry out a truly selfless act of mercy.